Okay. And Christine, what I'm going to do, if you don't mind, I want to make you the host.
Sure.
And that way, if there's anybody in the,
I can add additional.
oh, wait,
Sure.
hold on a second. Hold on. Let me see if I can still share my screen.
Think
Nope,
I can add it back for you to share it.
that would be great because I can't, since Zoom did an update, I can't figure it out.
I think
It
I
used to
think
be a
it's
little thing at the bottom, and now I can't figure out how to do it. So,
I think that you can, does it let you share now? I changed the setting.
yes. Okay. Well,
Okay.
we're gonna have to talk afterwards because I've been
Okay.
looking for that all week.
Okay.
Okay, let me reshare here. Okay, can you see?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Wonderful. All right, let's get rolling. Well, first and foremost, thank you, Christine, for allowing Carolyn and I to be here today to speak. Specifically, today we're going to be talking about cash flow, but in general, we just really acknowledge you for being open to allowing us to educate your audience around different financial pieces. Um, I'm Joanna Craney. For those that you don't know me, I am a financial advisor and special needs planner. I'm just going to give you a quick, brief background. I won't bore you with a lot, but I've been in the financial industry for the past 15 years and I've really spent the last 11 years learning as much as I possibly can around special needs planning. And I'm sure many of you understand that it's a very complex world out there to navigate. And so I really wanted to focus my attention there because personally speaking, I grew up with two sisters of my own who had different special needs. I saw what my family went through from the stress to the overwhelm to trying to navigate certain services, and you're putting out fires every day. My one sister had Down syndrome, and my one sister had severe mental health and addiction. Unfortunately, lost both of them, and now I am raising my niece who has special needs. So I get it from also now a caregiver perspective. So I sit on the same side of the table as many of you. And it's part of our mission to really get in front of as many families as possible, just purely for educational purposes, so you don't make the same mistakes I know I saw my own family make. And, when Carolyn and I met, I really saw, we saw the need for something more personal, planning that didn't just uh, focus on special needs planning in a silo or retirement planning in a silo, but planning that really brought the two together into a coordinated plan. And I think what really gave us our depth and what makes us really unique is that we have diversity of thought. We think very differently. We wear different hats when we're doing our planning. Carolyn really focuses on building out the strategies for retirement income and tax planning and those financial vehicles that are going to really protect your overall financial world. I focus a lot of my attention, of course, on the special needs planning and bringing a team together, a team like attorneys, CPAs, supports coordinators to make sure all of those different elements of the plan are integrated. And I do a lot of work on the investment side. So, Carolyn, do you want to just
Yeah,
introduce
I can give a
yourself?
quick introduction. Again, thank you all for taking the time. I know everybody's extraordinarily busy these days. As Joanna said, she and I work as a team, and I think what really helps Empowered Financial kind of work its magic with clients is that difference of thought that we have. As Joanna said, she has been encased in the special needs world for her entire career, and then some. And where I got into this industry really more to focus on retirement income planning and to help people get through retirement more safely than they typically are. My background is math and economics, bit of computers thrown in there. I'm over analytical. I love to crunch numbers and I really love to problem solve and try to figure out how can we take these resources, your goals and help you build a plan to get to where you want to go and do it as safely as possible. And when Joanna and I started working together, it really became apparent very quickly that what she was doing was fantastic, what I was doing was fantastic, but doing it together made it 10 times better because you can build the best plan in the world for your child with a disability, but if you're not on solid foundation, it can all crumble down. So by pulling us together and having us really, I mean, there's very few things that we agree on. We look at every problem very differently. We have different skill sets. We enjoy different parts of this business. And so by having us work together, you really get, I kind of say Joanna looks at the what is possible to bring into your family, and I'm looking to see how does it work and is it doable? Is it realistic? And can it work? And so it is kind of a neat conversation to put us next to each other. I'll hand it back to you.
And just to just touch, some people will ask what the acronyms after our name are. Carolyn and I are both big believers in continuing education. The designations that you see there all come from the American College of Financial Services. As you can see, Carolyn, the RICP is what gives her the ability to be able to to work the retirement income plans. The ChFC is really a broad spectrum of financial planning. It was a 9-course designation that really covers a lot from business planning to tax planning to investment planning and so forth. But the main focus one that I like to hang my hat on is that special needs designation, which Carolyn is actually working through right now, and I'm working on the RICP. And then the wealth management one is the WMCP, which really focuses on goals-based investing. And then the CLF for Carolyn was a leadership designation.
We also forgot to add the tax
Oh,
planning.
yes, I'm
I saw
sorry.
that. I
Thank
saw
you.
that this morning. I was
I
like, oh.
thank you for pointing that out. I might have done this before. I don't know, did I do this
No,
before?
it's been a year now. Yeah.
Jesus,
Go ahead.
time's fast. Yeah, so Carolyn also recently went through the tax planning designation through the American College, which has been really, really helpful in navigating tax planning from, planning from accumulation phases of retirement to distribution to legacy. So as you can tell, we're avid learners and we'll continue to do so moving forward because I think we're kind of both nerds that way.
The one thing we agree on.
Which
So
is to all of our benefits, because
yeah,
then you can share what you learn.
and there's always a lot to learn. I mean, I learn new stuff.
Well, just this week we learned that there's a new designation coming out about a Medicare and Medicaid. I'm sorry, Social Security claiming, and there's software that comes with that designation. So like we're pushing it through our broker dealer to get that approved, so we can jump right into that. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's always something new to learn.
So today, for today's purposes, our agenda is really going to focus on cash flow. And cash flow, I would say, is really often an afterthought in planning. And I think most people underestimate the importance of cash flow. And quite frankly, I would say most advisors won't even spend the time here, where we make it a big part of our process. So today we're going to focus on why it's important to understand cash flow, and how we use that cash flow to project the financial need for, of course, your own retirement, but also for your child with special needs, and um, where can we really find the sources to fund the supported care and continued quality of life for your child. And then we'll talk about, those risks that could potentially get in the way if you don't plan for them. So Carolyn's going to talk a lot about that. And then all the while, we also need to see, if we're allocating resources, we want to make sure you're doing it in the most tax efficient manner. And then we'll end with some Q&A. So understanding, why is it important to understand cash flow? So the first part of this is really awareness. If we need to have a good understanding of money coming into our financial model, so to speak, and money flowing out of our financial world. And we start with cash flow exercises that really help facilitate a better understanding of where dollars are coming from and where they're going. And this often leads to more, I would call it in-depth conversations around spending and potential waste. Now, some people look at their cash flow and they're like, wow, I didn't know I was spending that much in that certain area, and I like to cut back there. Or it could just be you're paying more for something than necessary. Oftentimes, and I'll just give you one example, we look at property and casualty insurance. We're not licensed there, but oftentimes we might be able to save clients' dollars in that area just by shopping, right? There might be a loss due to taxes. Maybe you're paying more in taxes than you need to because you're not capitalizing on an exemption or deduction. There could be high fees in something. So we really take a look at everything to figure out, is there potential waste in your cash flow where we can recapture it and repurpose it? We'll also work with our clients to separate the child's expenses from the parents' spending because these often get commingled. And this becomes more important when we're calculating the child's future care needs, which we'll get to later in the presentation. Once there's a sense of awareness, we can then identify areas of concern or potential optimization. And the next part is really sustainability. So most often, without having the awareness, people just have no idea that their spending is not sustainable. And it's not just for today, it's really for those future retirement purposes. And so with our cash flow,
And if I can jump in there, sometimes it's totally sustainable when people are putting themselves on a major diet on their spending and they don't need to.
that's a really good point, Carolyn. Yeah, absolutely. By going through this, sometimes we say, you know what, you can take that vacation, like take a breath. And then with our cash flow analysis and the financial modeling system that we use, we can age you 1 year at a time and show you, is it sustainable from these projections based on certain assumptions or not, really? So it really does help gain a gauge of where you're at. And then, of course, planning. So once we have an awareness and we've analyzed the sustainability of spending for today, tomorrow, and for legacy purposes, we can start to build out financial strategies that are based on informed decision making versus just throwing things at the wall and hoping that they stick. Um, and with the dollars moving in and out of your world, we can then plan how much goes towards consumption for today, and then how much goes towards consumption for the future. Or, maybe there's some project or major purchase that you're focusing on. And then, of course, for a lot of us, a big piece of this is making sure that there's enough dollars at the end of the day to fund legacy purposes and potentially a special needs trust. And then there's the financial stability of it all. So we build flexibility into these plans. We really do keep that in mind when we're designing these plans out. And we're also have our eye on risk factors that can throw your plan off course, which again, as I mentioned, Carolyn's going to touch on later in this presentation. And the goal really is to help you maintain your lifestyle for yourselves and for your child while building and protecting wealth and doing it in a way that reduces risk along the way that could throw things off. And so what we really need to do is, understand your current spending so that we can build those projections for the future. And really, without those projections, it's impossible to plan. And the reality is that your child's plan is only as good as your plan. So we really need to focus on both.
So the first thing that we do is we start to really look at where are the income sources. So I'll talk a little bit about the income sources for the parents, and then I'll pop it back to Joanna to talk about income sources for the child or children. And so when we're looking at our cash flow, the first half of it is what's coming in. And you can see all different areas where there could be dollars coming into the family. And all of these different dollars and different categories of income come with different risks. They come with different longevities. If there's a pension, it should last the rest of your lifetime. But what if it's your spouse's pension? Will it last your lifetime? If there's income coming from investments, what happens if there's volatility in the market or there's an interest rate change? How does that affect the income? As far as inheritance, this is one of the things we tend to see a lot is we'll have people that just kind of assume, yeah, my parents are going to give me X when they pass. Well, what if they have a long-term care need, or what if something is happening in their life that they can't leave this behind? So we need to look at each income source and think of it from, how guaranteed is this income? What happens if that income doesn't come in as long as you think it will, or not as high as you think it will? Even if it's earned income from your job, a lot of people get downsized as they get older, and what happens if that happens? And so we want to really fact check each area and talk through what are the risks, how is it taxed, what happens if different contingencies happen in your world. And we want to really try to come up with I'll say a conservative number of what we can plan to have as income. If somebody has earned income and they have an annual bonus, and the high bonus is here and the low bonus is here, let's plan on a low bonus, because we don't want to overextend anybody with future money that may not be there.
And then from the child's perspective, we want to understand what sources of income are relevant to them. For some of our families that we're working with, their child's working. So part of that conversation is like, okay, well, how many hours per week do they work? How long do you foresee your child working for? Maybe it's not until 65 or 67, maybe it's till 50. So let's put those into the calculations. Some of our individuals will never be able to work. So that's a factor. The other thing is we need to consider is what government benefits are they on now, and what government benefits may they be on in the future, and how may benefits change over time. I'll just give you one example. So for some of our folks, they might start out on SSI, right? And then when the parent retires and starts collecting Social Security benefits, they are eligible for the Disabled Adult Child Benefit, often called the DAC benefit, through Social Security. So to follow that up, we need to analyze maybe a Social Security claiming strategy in light of that special needs planning for the family as a whole. The other thing that we might consider is, okay, maybe there's a funded trust already at this point. So how does that factor in? When are we using those trust funds? Are we using it in the near term? Are we using it in the longer term? Does your child have an ABLE account? And if so, again, same thing. Are we saving that ABLE account for future expenses, and that those savings are going to stay in there? Or are we anticipating some nearer term needs for that ABLE account? There could be other family members or friends who plan on leaving an inheritance to your child outside of what your own legacy is. So maybe we'll be having conversations around that. And these are just some of the conversations we're having with parents and caregivers to really just get a better understanding of what income sources are relevant to the child, so that we can start to design a strategy to meet the legacy goals for that future care and quality of life that's needed.
So once we have the income understood, then we need to kind of look at the cash flow that's going out, the expenses. And for the parents, we break them into these 4 categories. One is debt. Most of us will have a mortgage, some will have car payments, some will have credit cards, different types of loans. And that obviously is typically a fixed rate that we're going to be paying on an annual basis or a monthly basis. Then we have fixed expenses, which is our real estate taxes, our insurances, the fixed, you go into January 1 and you know what those are going to be all year. There's variable expenses that are still necessary, as far as we've got to pay our gas bill. If our car breaks, we need to pay for that. But they're variable. We don't know what they're going to be. So we need to kind of think through what is past history going to show us that they tend to have been. If we've got tuition payments, if we've got, household maintenance, things of that nature, that's all going to fit in here as well. And then lastly is discretionary. And this you could say is not needed, but we all know that it's needed. Going out to dinner every once in a blue moon is needed. Going on vacation once in a blue moon is needed. And the holidays come around and we buy gifts. We give to charities. We like to have our hair done. Things of that nature. And while, if money's tight one week, I may take a much less vacation than I maybe did the last year, but I still would like to be able to utilize some sort of vacation here. And so what we do is we sit down with the parents and we have this exercise that we ask them to do that looks at past spending. And this past spending is going to give us an idea of what they've spent in each of these categories. And we always like to say, pretend like you're doing this on somebody else. Pretend like it's a couple down the street or a cousin that you don't know that well. And, take no blame, take no anything. There's no judgment here, but just look at how you have spent. And once you have what has been spent, look at it and say, am I happy with this? If this was me, would I do it like this again? And if you look at it and you say, you know what, I didn't realize I was spending so much money over here and it's not really giving me any joy. Or the opposite, I didn't realize I was spending so much over here, but boy, it gave me so much joy. You may say, I don't want to change any of this, or I might want to make some changes. And we'll work with the clients if they would like to make changes to help them put in kind of like guardrails for themselves, give them tips of what other clients have found helpful to help them kind of build the cash flow plan that they want to have. Most people just kind of spend and they don't think about it. But if you can build a spending plan for yourself, you can enjoy your money so much more. And so we first want to know how things have been, how you want them to be now. And then lastly, we're going to look at these expenses and think, okay, when you get to retirement, how different are these expenses going to be? If we're talking to somebody in their 40s and they've got 15 years left on their mortgage, they won't have that mortgage in retirement. So we'll build a projected cash flow for retirement that won't have the mortgage in it. But they're still going to have taxes, they're still going to have utilities, they're still going to have their insurances, and they might want to do different spending in retirement. They might want to pick up hobbies they don't have time to do right now. So we'll have long conversations to build out that projected income for retirement. So we end up really with three different cash flow plans. One for that's in your past, one that hopefully is today, and then one is the projected for retirement.
And then from the child's perspective, again, as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes this gets commingled with the parents' spending just because we spend on autopilot, I think, as parents. But we want to understand, the expenses today. What are you spending? So we'll kind of pull those out of the parents' cash flow, and then we want to understand, okay, what other expenses could there be in the future, and what's the timeline for that? Is it a fixed expense? Is it a variable expense? Is it a discretionary expense? Like for example, some of our families say, I want to make sure that every 2 to 3 years we update the phone or the iPad. And of course, you're paying utilities with that. So we need, we can plug that into the calculator. I think one of the biggest challenges is right now is that, the the future might look vague at this point, right? But it's a starting point. So when we're talking about especially housing and care management, which is a big part of our conversations, first of all, oftentimes we're recommending working with a care management agency to kind of, like plan of PA to start looking at a life care plan, incorporating some of those future costs in, and then we can pull their spreadsheets into our calculators and then do some projections and forecasting. Sometimes I push back because parents will give us a very, that's like the very minimal expenses because they just don't know. But I often will ask them, okay, well, what do you do? What do you do for fun? Because quite frankly, the government is not going to pay for your child to have fun. So do they go to the ball game? Would you like them to go on a vacation? Do they like to go out for dining occasionally? Again, iPads and communication devices. Certain therapies might not be covered. So do you want to see that continue? Obviously, hair, beauty, clothing. These are all things that will kind of go down the list and say, what kind of budget should we kind of target for right now to see like if you were gone yesterday, what needs to really be here to make sure that all of these things continue to happen for your child. And of course, just going back to the housing conversation, maybe it's a mortgage they have to pay. Maybe it's a rent they have to pay. If they're in a different type of group setting, part of their government benefits is going to go to the group setting. So we have to make sure that there's extra dollars to take care of all those other things to give them quality of life.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we start to figure out how rock solid the client's parents or the parents are, and then Joanna will jump back to figuring out the need for the child. I talked a little bit about coming up with those three cash flows. When we look at the future cash flow, we're still talking about everything in today dollars. And what I mean by that is if I'm not going to retire for 10 years and I need, I'm just going to pick a number, I need $80,000 a year to run everything in retirement or in my lifetime today, 10 years from now, $80,000 isn't going to spend like $80,000 because of inflation. So we have a series of calculators that we take these numbers, we build the projections, we target how many years until retirement, we add in the inflation, and we say, okay, well that's $80,000 might be $92,000 10 years from now that I'm going to need to have in retirement. And that $92,000, for example, is after I pay taxes. So depending on the client's assets, if all that they have is in a pre-tax, if it's in a 401k that hasn't been taxed yet, and we're going to pull that money out of Social Security and out of there, we're going to be paying taxes on those dollars. If the client has dollars, assets in after-tax accounts or in Roth accounts, the taxes are going to be very different. So we have to sit down and think about where are the dollars going to be coming from, how much are we going to really need to pull out of the client's model in retirement to pay the taxes, to deal with the inflation, and to make sure this all works. And so again, it's all conversations with the clients to make sure that they understand all of it. We also do a little bit of stress testing with the client because we all want to think that every day is going to go the way we want it to go. And our job is to make sure that we've had all the conversations of what can go differently. We also want to have the conversations that, we may have three kids, one of which we need to leave a special needs trust for, the other two may get married and have six grandchildren. Have we thought about how much we're going to want in a future budget for grandchildren when our kids are still in college now? Sometimes we ask that question. It's funny. It's always on the wife's face more so than the husband's, but just the smile of, oh, grandchildren, like what's that budget going to be? So we try to pad dollars a little bit to make sure that we're not ever getting into a place where they don't have as much as they really think they need. We also want to make sure that we're really taking into account the tax conversation, and this is where that tax designation has really helped us out. Um, so it's a lot of conversations, and then the very last kind of pushback to clients is on the reality factor of all of this. It's so easy. I think we all have this guilt of spending. Whether we spend really diligently or we don't, we all have this guilt that we spend on things that we shouldn't. And so sometimes we've got to kind of push them to spend. Sometimes we've got to say, now, if this cash flow that you showed us is real, then you would have money in a, Swiss bank account someplace. So we need to kind of make sure we're really getting down to the core of all of it. And we spend a lot of time here for that reason. Nobody follows the cash flow any longer. It's too hard. We spend through too many different mechanisms, and we're all too busy. Back in the day when we had, a checkbook and we paid cash a million years ago, it was really easy, and we ran out of money we didn't spend anymore. But today, there's 1,000 ways we can spend. And so this conversation, I think, is so overdue for most of our clients. And we try to make it as enjoyable as possible without anybody feeling, because there's no judgment. We don't care how people spend their money. We just want to make sure that they understand it and that we're projecting the right numbers going forward. You can go on to the next slide. So thank you. So this is just a snapshot of our software we call Design Center that we can age you a year at a time. And once we have a very firm cash flow, when we're looking at the retirement income, we literally can basically say, okay, if you're going to work from now until, say 65 or 67 or whatever the age is, at age 67 or whatever your retirement is, we will actually have dollars being pulled out of your modeling system up to that cash flow that we know that we need, incorporating in taxes. There's also a Social Security area within this model that grows with Social Security's inflation rate that helps to offset how much you need to pull out of your model, depending on what income you need. And we increase your income every year with inflation. And so what happens is this little blue bar over to the right that has the age on it, it's kind of small here, is we age that 1 year at a time. It'll literally pull dollars out of your model that is what you're using to live on. And we can see very quickly the health of your model. We're going to talk about contingency planning at the end, so I won't discuss it here. But we first build your model like blue skies are ahead, and there's no stresses to your model. Nothing goes wrong. After we go through that, we will build in contingency plans, and I'll touch that at the end.
So then from the cash flows that we've done on the special needs side of thing, looking at the cash flow of the child, we'll be using a very specific special needs calculator that we have access to. It's really the only one on the market at this point to calculate a capital future amount needed to fund a special needs trust. And so what you can see here is these are different categories broken down by the different, areas. So like how much you can see how much are we spending on medical, how much are we spending on special equipment, care assistance, if there's educational expenses in there, housing, transportation, recreation and lifestyle. And we can actually, just like Carolyn can age you 1 year at a time in the design center, in this specific calculator, we can age the child 1 year at a time and see based on inflation, like how do these expenses grow over time? And then from there, we can get into essentially almost like a design center or projection to see, okay, if mom and dad or caregivers were gone yesterday, what capital amount needs to come in to make sure that based on those cash flows, we can support that person for their time horizon, for their life expectancy. And so again, we're going to be putting assumptions in here based, on estimated rates of return, inflationary factors, your own retirement age, mortality ages, and timelines of expenses, and potentially how things can change over time with expenses, especially as care needs might increase. And again, we'll run scenarios based on, okay, if everything goes according to plan, what does this look like? How much is needed to come into this special needs trust for continued care, quality of life? And then, of course, stress testing it. If things don't go according to plan, what does that look like? And then really it dovetails into the next part of the conversation of, okay, well, where is this money all going to come from? And what types of funding really should be considered? And as you'll see here, any one of these assets can be left to a special needs trust. Most people will say, well, like, what can be left to a special needs trust? Well, a lot of different assets can be left to a special needs trust. Some of the funding sources most likely will be in part coming from government benefits and government programs, right? So that kind of takes some of the pressure off of these numbers, but we're going to factor that into the calculations. Real estate certainly, can be left to a special needs trust. It might get a little complicated, but I think more importantly, we just need to consider the potential risk factors that can get in the way of real estate or the home itself being left to the special needs trust. And just to give you again an example is, well, first of all, your home is a liquid. So there's that. So it would need to be sold in a market, hopefully favorable at the time of your death or prior to. And at that point in time, what will the value of your real estate be? Well, we don't know, right? So there's a unknown factor that is potentially a risk. It doesn't mean it is a risk. It could be a risk. It could be that, hey, we're not in a favorable housing market right now, and the value of the house is actually depreciated, and it's not what we expected. So we just need to honor that. The one good thing about real estate as it stands today in today's laws is that if you do leave real estate behind, it gets what's called a stepped up in cost basis, meaning that if you bought your house for $200,000 and it's now worth $500,000, there's no capital gains on that real estate. It gets stepped up to $500,000. The other thing to consider with real estate is sometimes people need to access the equity in their home to take care of future retirement funding or a future long-term care event. So we just, again, need to be mindful of that. Now, there's investment accounts. Investment accounts, specifically speaking of after-tax investment accounts, such as like a mutual fund portfolio, a stock portfolio, a bond portfolio, can all be left to a special needs trust. Again, we just need to consider the fact of on the date that you died, what is that account value going to be, right? We don't know because we're at the mercy of the stock market. So again, we just need to honor the fact that it's not a guaranteed source of funding for the special needs trust, but yes, it can be left to a special needs trust. I've already mentioned government benefits, so I'm going to move through that. Retirement funds. Now, oftentimes people have saved in their retirement funds. I will tell you, majority of the accounts that we see are large pre-tax retirement funds. So 401ks that have never been taxed, IRAs that have never been taxed. And yes, while they can be left to a special needs trust, they certainly can. One of the risk factors to consider is one, if they're invested in the market, again, market volatility, we don't know what the value of that account is going to be at the date of your death. Two, most likely you have used these funds during your retirement because that's the whole purpose, right? The retirement funds are meant for you to support you during your lifetime. On the pre-tax accounts, now while special needs trusts, qualified special needs trusts, get a tax favorable stretch of these inherited, if they're inherited accounts, over the lifetime of your beneficiary, we have to consider the fact that on pre-tax accounts, there's going to be RMDs or what's called required minimum distributions that are going to get kicked out or have to get kicked out every single year over that beneficiary's lifetime. And what happens is if we have a large pre-tax, let's call it IRA that's left behind and it's kicking out large RMDs inside of a special needs trust, well, trust tax rates are different than individual tax rates and they're less favorable for income purposes. So a lot of the times what we're doing with our strategies is over time converting some of those pre-tax dollars to Roth dollars, which are much more favorable from a tax perspective when leaving retirement accounts behind to a special needs trust. And I will tell you, last but certainly not least, is probably one of the most commonly used strategies because it's leverage is life insurance, and specifically permanent life insurance left behind to a special needs trust because it can provide an income tax free death benefit to the special needs trust at a guaranteed known value. So it gives more security to knowing that at the end of the day, if you spend down all of your assets, there's a life insurance policy that will go tax-free to the special needs trust for legacy purposes. And essentially, you could make one premium payment that buys a very large asset. And God forbid you die the next day, you've made one premium payment and you know that this life insurance policy is going to fund that special needs trust.
So I get to talk about all the fun risks. Um, so as we help clients plan for themselves and for their children, we are really looking at helping them, as Joanna stated earlier, we really kind of have four goals for clients. We want them to build as much wealth as possible with dollars that come into their world. We want to help them to protect themselves as much as possible and build in for contingencies. We want to help them to become as efficient as possible because anytime we can build efficiency, it means that there's less waste and there's more dollars that you can spend today, you can put towards protection for yourself, or you can spend later as far as savings or investments. And the last goal that we have for clients is they live their life. We want them to enjoy themselves today. We want them to keep their lifestyle. And so as we go through their planning, our goal is to look for all of the different risks that are out there. And these are some of the top ones. There's a couple more I might add even on there that I don't think we thought about. But, there's market volatility. We need to put money in the stock market, but we have days like today that the market doesn't always cooperate with us. Inflation over time is a huge killer to us. Taxes takes a lot out of our pocket throughout our lifetime and during legacy for a lot of products, especially if we live in Pennsylvania. If we were to prematurely die or if we have a disability, obviously that really hurts our income potential. And even in retirement, if we have a premature death, it can really hurt because maybe there's less Social Security income coming in or a pension got changed because of that death. So we want to really look at all of those things. The bigger picture for a lot of people is that long-term care risk. What happens if I'm 70 and I need to be in a nursing home for the last 3 years of my life, or 80 or 90? And where does that money come from? And then there's also just the cost of healthcare and in what is our health going to be and how much healthcare cost are we going to be spending with whatever our health is at that point. And then the very last one is just longevity risk. The longer we live, the more all of these things affect us. And I always say doctors in modern medicine has gotten really good at having us live a long life. Not always a life we want, but having us live a long life. And, if we're living to our late 80s or our 90s, which is projected for many of us, all of these risks, especially the inflation and the long-term care, is a higher probability of having a major impact. So once we go through that planning where we say, in blue skies, does everything work out? And is there still enough for you to live the way you want to live and leave behind for your child or your children what you want to leave behind? Then we're going to go through and we're going to look at those risks and say, well, what if we get a lower rate of return in the stock markets? What if you live longer than you think you're going to live? What if inflation's a little bit higher? What if taxes take a bigger bite out of what you're doing? What if you or your spouse, if you're married, have a premature death or have to retire early due to a disability or just because? And then lastly, what happens if there's a long-term care situation? And we're going to build into that. You can go on to the next slide, Joanna. And as we start to build a plan for clients, we are really going to try to build into our modeling system different ways to minimize those risks that we just talked about while doing those 4 promises of helping to grow wealth, helping to lower the risks. We want somebody that if nothing goes wrong in their life, they have just as much money as if they've never met us and never put in the protections in place. And in our modeling system, the one that we can age you a year at a time, we can look at your model the day we met you and with whatever recommendations we have. And we can kind of show you if nothing goes wrong, you're not in a worse place because you've put these protections in place. And that's our ultimate goal. But if any one of those things were to happen, and we all know in life, typically a few of those things will happen in our lifetime, of market problems or taxes going up or inflation getting higher or, health issues, then we want you to be in a better place. And so as we start to look at your modeling system, we basically go through and we want to make sure that first in the first top part of your model, and this model that we use, just to step back a little bit, was built by an economist back in the 1970s. He was a gentleman that went to school at NYU to basically be an economist and got out and basically became a financial advisor and was very frustrated that there was no way to know how to recommend what to do to clients. There was no system in place. And he built this model himself of just building out what comes into play. So like Joanna talked earlier that we're not licensed in home and auto insurance, and we're not. But your home and auto insurance is very important because God forbid you have poor car insurance and you have an accident that's your fault. It could wipe everything out that's in your auto. So we are trained to look at it, and then we will recommend back to your home and auto person to say, hey, ask them about this and ask them about that. If we look at so many different clients, if the fees look very high, we'll say, you know what, it looks to us like you're spending a lot for this. Go back to your broker and see if they can shop it for you. Or if you need a broker, we'll give you a couple names. But it's all about working for you so that you're in the best position possible. And this purple part of the model up here is all the protection areas. It's things that are going to protect your assets, protect your income, protect your legacy, protect your family. You'll notice that if you can read this, there's legal documents in there. There's Social Security, which is the government assets. There's life insurance, medical insurance, long-term care is in the medical. And it's all the things that are going to protect you. And we want to make sure that we build protection first because that is your foundation. We also want to have as part of your protection short-term savings because we don't know tomorrow what the market's going to do, and we don't want to always rely we can just pull money out of the stock market. So the foundation of, if you want to think of it as your home, the foundation of your home is having strong protection, having strong short-term cash flows. From there, we want to start to help you to build wealth, and we want to help you to build the long-term growth down in the bottom part of the model. We're always looking at debt. That's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're looking at a mortgage, something that has a low interest rate. It takes a long time and helps you get into a home. But there's good debt and bad debt, and we'll help minimize bad debt if possible. We're going to help you to look at the cash flows, and then we're going to help you to build a model that is as close to unsinkable as possible. We never know what the future's going to bring, but if we can try to plan for things that might come down the pike, but do it in a way that you're not at a financial loss because we've built it that way, then that'll help us all out. So, kind of the call up to action at the end, the conclusion is really helping you understand your numbers as far as your cash flow is really huge. Helping to on a regular basis try to track your spending, see how you spend, and update how it changes will really help you have a better eye to everything. The future care needs, that's a calculator that, again, we've not been able to find anywhere else except for the software that we use. It is something to where it's very hard to calculate otherwise. You can work with the financial advisor that has access to it. You can also work with some care management people that have their own programs, but you really want to try to have a handle. So many clients that we work with on a regular basis, they come to us and they just have a number in their head. This is what I think it is. And sometimes it's so not close to what it should be. And sometimes it's 3 times what it should be. And we just don't know until we get there. Want to really understand the funding choices and how, especially funding choices to leave behind, because they will all be taxed very, very differently. And taxes within a special needs trust are typically higher tax brackets than what you are used to paying in taxes. So it kind of really amplifies that risk. And then helping to make sure that we've built a plan that's as close to unsinkable as possible is really huge. So what questions do you all have?
I just want to say that was so valuable, and I want this to be required viewing for all of our future funded trusts. And these are all such great things to be thinking about if you want to really comprehensively have the right amount of assets ready to fund a trust. So it's really fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, we love the work we do, and it's really fun to help, I'll say educate, but also be educated as we walk through the process with each client. Does anybody have, because there's questions in the chat. Does
There are
anyone else have?
questions in the chat, and I think a lot of them are around accessing your guys' services. So if you want to give like a little plug or overview on folks doing an inquiry with you guys, please.
Do that?
Yeah.
Joanna?
I mean, first you could go to our website, because if you first of all you go to our website, there's a ton of information on there. The second thing is on the very front page, there's like a schedule, book a meeting with us. And so if you click on book a meeting with us, it'll take you to our Calendly link where you can schedule an introduction. And that introduction will allow us about like 45 minutes to an hour to really just to get to know one another. And then what we can do from there is like see if our services will be meaningful for you and your family. And then we can walk you through what our process looks like and how we work with clients specifically. Also, if you email us at info@empowered-fs.com, that'll come to our inbox. So if you have any specific questions, feel free to email us there.
And there's a question in the chat about costs. It's kind of hard to answer because it really depends on what the clients are looking for. Most of our clients want this full planning that we do. And so we do have like a 1 year financial consulting fee that we will charge. And that really depends on what they're looking for, as it's a graduated fee depending on what services they're looking for. Oftentimes somebody will come to us and want one thing. When we walk through our process and kind of talk through all we do, then they're like, oh no, I want that. That's very helpful. But if somebody just comes in and says, hey, I need to talk to you about, X, or I need to, do some investments, or I need to do life insurance or something, we can do those things without the financial consulting fee. But generally, like the first 9 months to year we work with a client, it's going to be working with through this financial consulting fee.
Sounds like some folks are interested in connecting with you, so I'm
Wonderful.
happy to hear that. It's well worth it. We have another question in the chat. Are there apps to help adults with disabilities track the monies? I use Monarch Money, but I think it is too complicated and cumbersome for my son. That is an excellent question.
Actually, that's a great question. I don't know of any, but
I mean, I know that I don't use TrueLink, but I know TrueLink
I was
has
just
like
about to say TrueLink. Yeah, TrueLink is a platform that we use as trustee, but families can use it as well, where they can open it's a debit card, but it doesn't actually direct debit out of a bank account. Like the only money that can be used is the money that's on the card. And the person who is the holder of the funds can see how they're all spent. And there are reporting features and also a little dashboard, and the TrueLink card holder, so the client or family member who is using the card does have a dashboard as well. So it's kind of just like a simplified banking view for like a checking account is kind of what it looks like. And there's a budget feature, and so that might be a way to do that.
I'm just looking to see like other like children's budgeting apps that may kind of do a
Mhm.
crossover,
Yeah,
but I'm not seeing anything
it's a
pop
great
up
question.
lately.
I know there are a number of programs aimed at providing education to teens and people with
Yeah.
disabilities around financial literacy. There's one called Money Smart. Um, so that can also give some of that
Yeah.
knowledge on just how to read financial information and make sense of it.
There is a program through the American College that's called Know Yourself, Grow Your Wealth, that I believe is free to give out, and I think I can find a link for it if anybody's interested. Um, that is really just a financial literacy program. It's really designed for kids in college or high school. It's been out for a few years now. But it's not specifically a tracking app.
Hmm.
But that may be an idea to maybe talk to the American College about growing something like that.
Yeah. Any other questions?
we can send follow-up emails out to everybody with more information, contact information. And then eventually, hopefully, we'll get this approved for YouTube and we can send the link out of the recording.
I'm hoping that happens because I want to share it far and wide. So lots of feedback that this is really helpful. We're so grateful for you guys to come on and share your knowledge. And thank you so much for being with us today. And
Thanks
we
for
will
having me.
have a final series for the spring in April. And that's going to be on tax planning, which will be, I think, mainly Carolyn teeing that one
No,
up. No? Okay. A little mix,
we'll
a bit of
drag
a
Joanna
mix.
into it.
Well,
It's funny, again, we wear such different hats. She focuses so much to the tax in legacy.
hmm,
She's the she leans towards the accountant's end or the attorney's end. I lean towards
hmm,
the accountant's end.
hmm.
So
That makes sense. So more of the future planning piece would be on
yeah.
her plate. Well, I know my brain is swimming with taxes at the moment, so
I bet.
I'm so sorry.
that's okay. Stress taxes. Yes. Well, thank you, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you guys again in April.